Elena remembers the exact moment her life changed forever. She was driving home after a beautiful performance at the Grand Theater, her fingers still tingling from playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The audience had given her 3 standing ovations that night. She could still hear the applause ringing in her ears as she drove through the rain-soaked streets. Then came the screech of tires, the blinding headlights, and the sickening crunch of metal. After that, only darkness. When Elena woke up in the hospital 3 days later, the first thing she tried to do was move her fingers. Her right hand felt strange, heavy, like it belonged to someone else. The doctor's words crushed her more than the actual accident ever could. "The nerve damage is severe," he said, not meeting her eyes. "With therapy, you'll regain most normal function. But the precision needed for professional piano performance? I'm sorry, Miss Rossi, that level of control may never return." Elena spent the next 6 months trying to prove him wrong. Every morning she went to physical therapy. Every afternoon she sat at her piano, trying to play the pieces she once performed effortlessly. But her damaged hand betrayed her again and again. Notes came out uneven, timing felt off, and the beautiful music that once flowed from her fingers now sounded broken and incomplete. Her manager called 2 months after the accident. "Elena, the contracts are falling through. The venues want guarantees you can perform at your previous level. Without that, I can't book you anywhere. I'm sorry, but I have to let you go." One by one, everything fell apart. The concert invitations stopped coming. Other pianists took the performances she had been scheduled for. Her social media followers, who once praised every video she posted, began to drift away to newer, more active performers. The music world moved on without her, as if she had never existed. The medical bills piled up quickly. Surgery, therapy sessions, medications, follow-up appointments. Elena had some savings, but they vanished faster than she could have imagined. Her beautiful apartment with its view of the city skyline became impossible to afford. She sold her furniture piece by piece, watching strangers carry away the life she had built. The hardest thing to let go was her personal piano. A beautiful instrument her grandmother had given her when she turned 16. The same piano on which she had practiced for countless hours, preparing for the performances that made her famous. A young music student bought it, her eyes shining with dreams. Elena tried to smile as they loaded it onto the truck, but inside, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She thought about calling her parents. But that bridge had burned years ago when she chose music over joining the family business. Her father had been clear during their last conversation. "If you walk out that door to chase this foolish dream, don't bother coming back." She had walked out with her head held high, determined to prove him wrong. Now crawling back felt impossible. Her pride wouldn't allow it, and she doubted they would even answer her call. Friends from her performing days gradually stopped reaching out. At first they sent concerned messages and offered support, but as months passed and Elena withdrew further into herself, the messages became less frequent, then stopped altogether. She understood. They were busy with their own careers, their own lives. She was a reminder of what could go wrong, and nobody wanted that kind of negativity around them. 6 months after the accident, Elena found herself living in a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood she would never have visited before. Her fancy dresses hung uselessly in the closet, replaced by simple, practical clothes from discount stores. She had exactly $300 left in her bank account and rent due in 2 weeks. She needed a job. Any job. Elena spent days applying to music schools, offering to teach beginner students. But without recent performance credentials and with her injury, nobody would hire her. She tried applying to office positions, but her resume showed years dedicated solely to music. Employers took one look and moved on to more conventional candidates. Finally, desperate and running out of options, Elena saw an advertisement in the local newspaper. Experienced housekeeper needed for private estate. Room and board included. No experience necessary, will train the right candidate. Room and board meant she wouldn't need to worry about rent or food. Elena had never cleaned professionally in her life. Her performing schedule had been so demanding that she'd hired someone to clean her apartment. But desperation makes people do things they never imagined possible. She called the number. A woman with a kind voice answered. "Ashford Estate, Mrs. Chen speaking." "I'm calling about the housekeeping position," Elena said, trying to sound confident despite her trembling voice. "Can you come for an interview tomorrow morning? 8 o'clock sharp." Elena agreed, even though she had no idea what she was getting herself into. The next morning, she took 3 buses to reach the estate, located in the wealthiest part of the city. The gates alone looked more expensive than anything Elena currently owned. As she walked up the long driveway, she stared at the massive mansion ahead. It looked like something from a movie, with its perfect gardens, marble fountains, and windows that gleamed in the morning sun. Mrs. Chen met her at the servants' entrance. She was a small, neat woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through Elena's nervous smile. They sat in a small office off the kitchen, and Mrs. Chen asked her standard questions about availability and work ethic. "You seem different from our usual applicants," Mrs. Chen observed. "Your posture, the way you speak. You've had a different life before this, haven't you?" Elena's throat tightened. "Yes, but that life is over now. I need this job, Mrs. Chen. I'm a hard worker and I'll learn quickly. Please give me a chance." Something shifted in Mrs. Chen's expression. Maybe it was the genuine desperation in Elena's voice, or maybe she simply believed in second chances. "The work is hard. The family expects perfection. Some of the staff can be difficult. Are you sure you want this?" "I'm sure," Elena lied. She wasn't sure about anything anymore except that she was out of options. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "You can start Monday. Be here at 6 in the morning. Bring enough clothes for a week. Your room is small but private. Meals are provided. We'll start you on a trial basis." As Elena rode the bus back to her apartment, reality began to sink in. She, Elena Rossi, who had performed for presidents and royalty, who had been featured in classical music magazines, who had once been called the most promising pianist of her generation, was about to become a maid. She looked down at her damaged hand, flexing the fingers that would no longer create beautiful music. Instead, they would scrub floors, wash dishes, and dust furniture. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away. Pride wouldn't pay her bills. Dreams wouldn't fill her empty stomach. Sometimes survival means accepting whatever life offers, even when it feels like losing everything you once were. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough, and yet Elena dreaded it with every fiber of her being. Elena's first day at the Ashford estate started at 5:30 in the morning. She woke up in her new room, a small space tucked away in the staff quarters with just enough room for a narrow bed, a tiny dresser, and a window that looked out onto the service alley. It was nothing like her old apartment, but at least it was hers. Mrs. Chen had laid out a uniform the night before. Black dress, white apron, sensible shoes. Elena stared at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Where was the elegant performer who wore designer gowns on stage? This person looked tired, ordinary, and visible. The other staff members gathered in the kitchen for morning assignments. There were 6 of them in total. Mrs. Chen introduced Elena to everyone, but the atmosphere felt cold from the start. Victoria, the head maid, looked Elena up and down with barely concealed disgust. She was a woman in her early 30s, attractive and aware of it, with perfectly styled hair even at 6 in the morning. "Another one who thinks cleaning is easy work," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's see how long this one lasts." Raymond, the butler's assistant, smirked from his position by the coffee pot. He was tall and handsome in an arrogant way, clearly used to being the center of attention. "Look at those hands," he said, grabbing Elena's wrist before she could pull away. "So soft. Never done a real day's work, have you?" Elena pulled her hand back, her face burning with shame. The damaged nerves in her right hand made his grip painful, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her wince. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. "That's enough. Everyone has to start somewhere. Victoria, show Elena her duties for today." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Follow me, new girl." The next 8 hours were the hardest of Elena's life. Victoria assigned her every unpleasant task she could think of. Scrubbing the servants' bathroom, cleaning behind the massive refrigerators in the kitchen, polishing all the brass fixtures in the hallway until her arms ached. Every time Elena finished something, Victoria found fault with it. "You missed a spot here. Do it again. This isn't clean enough. Start over. Are you always this slow? We don't have all day." The other staff members watched with amusement. Nobody offered to help or showed her easier ways to do the work. Raymond made jokes at her expense whenever he passed by. Even the cook, Mrs. Patterson, a grandmother type who should have been kind, barely acknowledged Elena's existence. But the worst part wasn't the work or even the mockery. It was the Montgomery family themselves. Elena met them properly on her second day when she was assigned to serve breakfast. Mr. Richard Montgomery sat at the head of the table, reading his financial papers and barking orders without looking up. His wife, Clarissa, spent the entire meal complaining about the gardener, the weather, and the charity gala that wasn't being planned to her satisfaction. Their daughter Olivia breezed in late, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than Elena earned in 6 months. She was 19 but acted like a spoiled child, whining about everything from the temperature of her coffee to the way her toast was cut. Only the son, Thomas, seemed different. He was 16, quiet, with kind eyes hidden behind reading glasses. He actually said thank you when Elena poured his orange juice, which earned him an eye roll from his sister. "Why are you thanking the help?" Olivia laughed. That's literally her job. Elena kept her face blank, playing her role as the invisible servant. But inside, humiliation burned like acid. The real nightmare began in the second week. Elena was cleaning the formal dining room when Olivia walked through with her friends. They were laughing about something, and Olivia was carrying a glass of red wine even though it was barely noon. "Watch out," Olivia said. But she didn't watch out at all. She bumped into Elena deliberately, sending the glass flying. Red wine splashed across the cream-colored carpet that Elena had spent an hour cleaning that morning. "Oh no," Olivia said in a fake sweet voice. "How clumsy of you. I guess you'll have to clean that up." Her friends giggled as they walked away, leaving Elena on her hands and knees, scrubbing at the wine stain while tears of frustration burned behind her eyes. Victoria appeared moments later. "What happened here? You're supposed to be careful around the family." "She spilled it, not me," Elena said quietly. "Are you calling Miss Olivia a liar?" Victoria's voice turned sharp. "That's not acceptable. You'll stay late tonight to make sure this carpet is spotless, and that time comes out of your evening break." There was no point in arguing. Elena learned quickly that in this house the staff had no voice, no power, no dignity. They existed to serve, and any complaint was seen as insubordination. The nights were the hardest. Alone in her small room, exhausted from 14-hour days, Elena would look at her hands. The hands that once brought audiences to their feet now smelled of cleaning chemicals and looked rough from constant scrubbing. She tried flexing her damaged fingers, remembering the feel of piano keys, the way music used to flow through her like breathing. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she just stared at the ceiling, wondering how her life had gone so wrong. But mostly she tried not to feel anything at all. Numbness was easier than facing the reality of how far she had fallen. Victoria's cruelty intensified as the weeks passed. She seemed to take personal offense to Elena's existence. Maybe it was jealousy, the way some people get angry when they sense someone is different from them, potentially better in some hidden way. Or maybe Victoria was just mean and enjoyed having power over someone. She started assigning Elena the most degrading tasks specifically to humiliate her. Cleaning toilets while the other staff had their lunch break, washing windows in the rain, carrying heavy loads that made her damaged hand throb with pain. Raymond joined in the bullying, making crude comments whenever Victoria wasn't around to hear. The other staff members either participated or looked the other way. Nobody wanted to be Victoria's next target, so they stayed silent while Elena suffered. Mrs. Chen seemed to sense something was wrong, but she was often busy managing the entire household. The few times she checked on Elena, Victoria made sure everything looked perfect. Elena thought about quitting 100 times. But where would she go? She had no money saved up yet, no other job prospects, nowhere else to live. She was trapped by her own desperation, forced to endure treatment that would have been unthinkable in her former life. One evening, as she scrubbed the kitchen floor after everyone else had gone to bed, Elena heard piano music drifting from somewhere in the house. Someone was practicing badly, stumbling over the same notes repeatedly. The sound called to her like a siren song, reminding her of everything she had lost. She stopped scrubbing and just listened, tears streaming down her face. That had been her life once. Music had been her purpose, her joy, her identity. Now she was nobody, nothing but a servant who existed to clean up other people's messes. But Elena had survived this long. She had survived the accident, survived losing everything, survived starting over from nothing. She could survive this too. She had to. She finished scrubbing the floor, put away her supplies, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring more humiliation, more backbreaking work. more cruelty from people who would never see her as human. But she would get through it. She would survive. She had no choice. 3 months had passed since Elena started working at the Ashford estate. She had learned to keep her head down, work quietly, and avoid Victoria's wrath as much as possible. The bullying hadn't stopped, but Elena had become better at enduring it. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, invisible and silent. Tuesday afternoon was her favorite time of the week. The family usually went out for lunch at the country club, and most of the staff took their break. It was the only time the massive house felt peaceful. Elena was assigned to clean the music room, a beautiful space filled with afternoon sunlight and dominated by a magnificent grand piano. The piano sat in the corner like a sleeping giant, its black surface gleaming. Elena had cleaned this room dozens of times, always careful not to touch the keys as if they might burn her fingers. The instrument was a Steinway, probably worth more than she would earn in 5 years of working here. She was dusting the bookshelves when she heard someone enter. Thomas walked in, his shoulders slumped, carrying sheet music. He didn't seem to notice Elena at first. He sat at the piano bench and placed the music on the stand. Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major. Elena froze, her dusting cloth forgotten in her hand. Thomas started playing, and within seconds, Elena could hear everything wrong. His finger positions were off, his timing uncertain, and he kept stumbling over the same passage in the middle. He played it again. Same mistake, again, same problem. His frustration was visible in the tense set of his shoulders. After the 7th attempt, he slammed his hands down on the keys in a discordant crash. "I can't do this," he muttered to himself. "Dad's going to be so disappointed. Elena should have left." That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. But hearing that beautiful piece played so incorrectly was like watching someone hurt something she loved. Before she could stop herself, words came out of her mouth. "You're tensing your 4th and 5th fingers. That's why you keep missing the run." Thomas jumped, spinning around on the bench. "I didn't know anyone was here." "What did you say?" Elena's heart pounded. What had she done? She should apologize, leave immediately, pretend she never spoke. But Thomas was looking at her with such hope in his eyes, not with the contempt she usually received from the family. "The passage you're struggling with," she said quietly. "You're tensing up right before it. Your fingers get stiff, and that's why they can't move fast enough. You know piano." Thomas stood up, his expression amazed. "Can you show me what you mean?" Every instinct told Elena to refuse, to run, to protect her secret. But the pull of the piano was too strong. She hadn't touched real keys in months. Her hands were shaking as she approached. "I really shouldn't," she whispered. "Please," Thomas said. "My recital is in 3 weeks and I'm terrible. My piano teacher quit and I can't figure this out on my own. My father expects me to perform well. It's important to him." Elena understood pressure from parents. She understood expectations and disappointment. Against her better judgment, she sat down at the bench. The familiar feel of it brought tears to her eyes. She placed her hands on the keys, her damaged right hand beside her good left hand. "Watch carefully," she said, and began to play the difficult passage slowly. Even with her injury, even after months without practice, muscle memory took over. Her fingers moved across the keys like they were having a conversation with an old friend. She played the section that Thomas had been struggling with, breaking it down into smaller pieces, showing him exactly how to position each finger. "See? Keep your wrist loose. Don't fight the piano. Let the music flow through your hands, not force it out." She played it again, this time at full speed. The notes filled the room, pure and clear and achingly beautiful. For those few seconds, Elena wasn't a maid anymore. She was herself again. When she finished, she realized Thomas was staring at her with his mouth open. "That was incredible," he breathed. "You play like a professional." "Who are you?" Reality crashed back down on Elena. Her hands flew off the keys as if they had burned her. "I'm nobody. Please forget this happened. I shouldn't have touched your piano. Are you joking? That was amazing." Thomas's excitement was genuine. "You have to teach me, please. I'll pay you, or I don't know, I'll figure something out." "No." Elena stood up quickly. "I can't. Victoria would kill me if she knew I was even talking to you like this. The family would fire me." "I won't tell anyone," Thomas promised. "This can be our secret, please. You don't understand. This recital means everything. If I mess it up, my father will be so disappointed in me. He already thinks I'm not good enough at anything." Elena heard the pain in his voice. She knew that feeling too well. The desperate need to prove yourself, to show you're worth something. She looked at this boy who had been the only person in the house to treat her with basic kindness, and she felt her resolve weakening. "When do your parents usually go out?" she asked, already knowing she was making a mistake. Thomas's face lit up. "Most afternoons. Mom has her charity meetings, Dad's at the office, and Olivia's usually out with friends. We'd have at least 2 hours 3 times a week. And Victoria? The other staff? They do the upstairs cleaning and work in the kitchen during that time. The music room is in the east wing. Nobody comes here." Elena closed her eyes. This was dangerous. If anyone found out, she'd lose her job, the only stability she had. But the chance to touch a piano again, to teach, to do something that mattered, it called to something deep inside her that had been dying slowly since the accident. "Okay," she said finally, "but you can never tell anyone. Not your friends, not your family, nobody. If people find out, this stops immediately. I promise," Thomas said eagerly. "Cross my heart. This stays between us." For the next 20 minutes, Elena worked with Thomas on the Chopin piece. She showed him proper hand position, explained the emotion behind each phrase, taught him to listen to the spaces between notes as much as the notes themselves. He was actually talented, she realized. He just needed someone who understood music to guide him. When they heard voices in the hallway, Elena quickly returned to her dusting. Thomas grabbed his sheet music and tried to look casual. Mrs. Patterson, the cook, poked her head in. "Thomas, your mother called. She'll be home in an hour." "Thanks, Mrs. Patterson." The cook left, and Thomas turned to Elena with a conspiratorial smile. "Same time Thursday?" Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After he left, she sat down heavily on the window seat, her heart racing. What had she just agreed to? But despite her fear, something inside her felt alive for the first time in months. She had played piano again. She had taught someone, shared her knowledge, done something meaningful. For a brief moment, she had been more than just a maid who scrubbed floors and endured insults. That night, alone in her room, Elena flexed her damaged hand. The nerves still didn't work properly. She still couldn't play at a professional level, but maybe that didn't matter. Maybe there were different ways to be part of the music world, or maybe she was being foolish, risking the little security she had for a few stolen moments at a piano. Only time would tell if she had made the right choice. But for now, for the first time since the accident, Elena felt a tiny spark of hope flickering in the darkness that had consumed her life. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. For 3 weeks, Elena and Thomas kept their secret. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon when the house was quiet and the family was away, they met in the music room. Elena taught him everything she knew. How to breathe with the music. How to make each note tell a story. How to play not just with his fingers but with his heart. Thomas improved dramatically. The frustrated boy who had been slamming his hands on the keys was gone. In his place was a focused young musician who actually understood what he was playing. He practiced the techniques Elena taught him even when she wasn't there, and it showed. "You're going to be wonderful at the recital," Elena told him during their session on the 3rd Thursday. "Your father will be so proud." Thomas smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I wish you could be there to see it. None of this would be possible without you." "Just knowing you'll do well is enough for me," Elena said, though part of her ached to be in an audience again, to be part of that world she had lost. What Elena didn't know was that Victoria had been watching her. The headmate had noticed Elena's strange absences during the afternoon shifts. At first she thought Elena was just being lazy, sneaking off to rest. But when she couldn't find her anywhere, her suspicion grew into something darker. On the 4th Thursday, Victoria followed Elena. She stayed hidden in the hallway, watching through the partially open door of the music room. What she saw made her blood boil with jealous rage. There was Elena, the maid who was supposed to be beneath everyone, sitting at the family's expensive piano like she belonged there. And she was playing beautifully, teaching the Montgomery boy as if she had any right to do so. Worse, Thomas was looking at Elena with respect, admiration even. The same respect he never showed to Victoria, despite all her attempts to get his attention. Victoria had always prided herself on being the most important staff member, the one the family relied on. She had worked hard to get her position, dealt with her own share of difficulties. And here was this newcomer, this nobody getting special treatment from the family's son. She didn't confront them right away. Victoria was smarter than that. She waited, plotted and planned her revenge carefully. The next morning, Victoria went straight to Mrs. Montgomery. She found her in the morning room, planning the menu for an upcoming dinner party. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'm so sorry to disturb you," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false concern. "But there's something you need to know about the new maid, Elena." Mrs. Montgomery looked up from her papers, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Victoria? I'm very busy. I've seen her spending time alone with Thomas in the music room, unsupervised, several times now." Victoria let the implications hang in the air. Mrs. Montgomery's expression hardened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, ma'am. I'm just concerned. She's been touching the family piano without permission, and she's been having private meetings with your teenage son. I thought you should know." The words were carefully chosen to sound worse than the reality. Victoria made it seem improper, inappropriate, maybe even dangerous. Mrs. Montgomery stood up immediately. "Where is she now?" "In the kitchen, ma'am." 10 minutes later, Elena was called into Mrs. Montgomery's office. Her stomach dropped when she saw the angry expression on her employer's face. "Is it true you've been spending time alone with my son?" Mrs. Montgomery demanded. Elena's mouth went dry. I was helping him with his piano practice. You were hired as a maid, not as a music teacher. You have absolutely no right to touch our piano or to spend time alone with Thomas." "What were you thinking?" "Thomas asked for my help. He was struggling with his recital piece and I just wanted to—" "I don't care what he asked for." Mrs. Montgomery cut her off. "You're a servant in this house. You don't get to make decisions about how you interact with my family. Pack your things. You're fired." Elena felt the world spinning. "Please, Mrs. Montgomery, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to help." Before Mrs. Montgomery could respond, Thomas burst into the office. "Mom, wait. Don't fire her." "Thomas, go to your room. This doesn't concern you." "Yes, it does." Thomas stood his ground, something Elena had rarely seen him do with his parents. "Elena was helping me because I begged her to. My recital is in 1 week and I was terrible. She's an incredible teacher. If you fire her, I won't perform at the recital." Mrs. Montgomery stared at her son in shock. "Excuse me? I mean it. That recital is important to you and Dad, right? For your social standing? Well, if Elena goes, I don't perform. I'll sit there on stage and not play a single note." The room fell silent. Elena could see Mrs. Montgomery calculating, weighing her options. The recital was important. Many influential families would be there. Having Thomas refuse to perform would be a massive embarrassment. Finally, Mrs. Montgomery spoke through gritted teeth. "Fine, she can stay. But Elena, you work twice as hard from now on. No more time with Thomas. No more touching that piano. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena whispered, relief flooding through her. "And Thomas, we will discuss your behavior later. Go to your room." Thomas glanced at Elena apologetically before leaving. Victoria, who had been standing in the doorway, looked furious that her plan hadn't worked completely. From that day forward, Victoria's cruelty intensified to levels Elena hadn't thought possible. She was determined to make Elena quit since she couldn't get her fired. Victoria started hiding Elena's cleaning supplies, forcing her to search for hours and making her late completing tasks. Then she would report Elena for being slow and inefficient. She destroyed Elena's work when no one was looking, scrubbing freshly cleaned windows with dirty hands, and then blamed Elena for doing a poor job. She spread vicious rumors among the staff, claiming Elena was trying to seduce Thomas, that she was putting on airs, that she thought she was better than everyone else. Raymond and the other staff members, always eager to have someone to pick on, joined in with enthusiasm. They accidentally bumped into Elena constantly, making her drop things. They hid her uniform so she had to wear dirty clothes. They made her work through meals and breaks, claiming there was too much to do. Olivia, who had overheard about the piano incident from Victoria, made Elena's life even worse. She found it hilarious that the maid had dared to touch their piano. She started targeting Elena specifically, spilling things on purpose, making messes right after Elena cleaned, and laughing about it with her friends. One afternoon, Olivia dumped an entire tray of makeup and cosmetics on the bathroom floor Elena had just cleaned. "Oops," she said with a cruel smile. "How clumsy of me. Better clean that up." When Elena bent down to pick up the scattered items, Olivia accidentally kicked them, sending them rolling across the floor. Her friends laughed as Elena crawled on her hands and knees, gathering everything while they watched like it was entertainment. Elena endured it all in silence. She had no choice. She couldn't quit because she had nowhere to go. She couldn't complain because no one would listen. The only person who had shown her kindness was Thomas, and now she couldn't even speak to him without risking her job. At night, Elena lay in her small bed, her body aching from overwork, her spirit bruised from constant humiliation. She thought about her old life, about the person she used to be. That Elena seemed like a character from a story now, someone who couldn't possibly have been real. But in the darkness, she could still hear music in her head, the pieces she used to play, the beauty she used to create. They kept her going when everything else told her to give up. Thomas's recital was in 3 days. She wouldn't be able to attend, of course. Servants weren't invited to such events, but she hoped he would remember what she taught him. She hoped he would play beautifully and make his father proud. It was the only good thing she had to hold on to in a world that seemed determined to crush her completely. The night of Thomas's recital arrived with unexpected complications. Mrs. Montgomery insisted that all the staff attend to assist the family. Elena's heart sank when she heard. Being at the recital meant watching from the shadows, seeing the world she had lost while serving people who treated her like she was invisible. The recital was being held at Heartfelt Auditorium, the same venue where Elena had performed countless times in her previous life. Walking through those familiar doors in a maid's uniform felt like a knife twisting in her chest. She remembered the last time she had been here, taking her bows to thunderous applause, flowers being thrown onto the stage. Now she stood in the corner, holding Mrs. Montgomery's coat and purse, just another servant. The auditorium filled with well-dressed families, all there to watch their children perform. Elena spotted several people she had known from her performing days, though none of them recognized her. Why would they? Nobody really looks at the help. Thomas performed third in the program. Elena's heart pounded as he walked onto the stage, looking nervous but determined. He sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. For just a moment, his eyes scanned the audience, and Elena knew he was looking for her. She was too far back in the shadows for him to see, but she whispered, "You can do this." Then he began to play. The Chopin nocturne flowed from his fingers like water, each note perfect and full of emotion. He didn't just play the piece. He understood it, felt it, lived it. Every technique Elena had taught him was there, woven seamlessly into a performance that was truly beautiful. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. This was why she had loved music, not for the fame or the applause, but for moments like this, watching someone discover their own voice, their own connection to something greater than themselves. Even if no one knew her part in it, she knew. And that was enough. The audience erupted in applause when Thomas finished. His father actually smiled, and his mother looked genuinely proud. Thomas took his bow, and for a brief moment his eyes found Elena in the back. He nodded slightly, just to her. "Thank you." During the intermission, disaster struck. The guest performer for the evening, a renowned pianist named Christopher Blake, who was supposed to close the show, collapsed backstage. Elena heard the commotion and saw the ambulance arrive. "Food poisoning," someone said. Severe enough that he couldn't possibly perform. The recital coordinator was in a panic. "What do we do?" "We promised the audience a professional performance. This is a disaster." Parents began grumbling. They had paid good money for tickets, expecting to hear a master pianist. Some started heading for the exits. Thomas found Elena in the chaos backstage. "You have to play," he said urgently. "What?" "No, Thomas, I can't." "Yes, you can. You're better than anyone here. Please, Elena, they need someone. I'm a maid. Nobody wants to hear a maid play piano. You're not just a maid. You're a pianist. I know you are. I've heard you play. You're incredible." Before Elena could protest further, Thomas had grabbed her hand and was pulling her toward the stage coordinator, a stressed woman named Helen who was about to have a breakdown. "She can play," Thomas announced. "She's a professional pianist." Helen looked at Elena's uniform with obvious skepticism. "Is this some kind of joke?" "I'm really not," Elena started. "Please," Thomas interrupted. "Just listen to her play for 30 seconds. If she's not good enough, fine, but at least give her a chance." Helen glanced at her watch, at the restless audience, at the empty stage. "Fine, 30 seconds. But if you're wasting my time, you're both out of here." They went to a practice room where an upright piano sat in the corner. Elena's hands were shaking as she sat down. She hadn't performed for an audience in over a year. Her damaged hand still didn't work properly. What if she failed? What if she humiliated herself in front of everyone? But then her fingers touched the keys and everything else disappeared. She played the opening of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a piece she had chosen specifically because it could work around her hand injury. The music poured out of her, all the pain and loss and longing of the past year transformed into something beautiful and heartbreaking. When she finished the excerpt, Helen was staring at her with wide eyes. "Who are you?" "Just someone who used to play," Elena whispered. "You're performing tonight. I don't care what you're wearing or who you work for." That was extraordinary. Mrs. Montgomery appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. "What is going on here?" "Elena, what are you doing?" "She's saving your son's recital," Helen said firmly. "The guest artist is in an ambulance and we need a replacement. This woman is a brilliant pianist. She's our maid." Mrs. Montgomery looked horrified. "I don't care if she's the Queen of England," Helen snapped. "We have 200 people out there who paid for a professional performance. She can deliver that. Unless you want to go out there and explain why we're canceling?" Mrs. Montgomery's face went through several shades of red, but she said nothing. 10 minutes later, Elena stood backstage in her uniform, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The stage lights dimmed and Helen walked out to introduce her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an unexpected change to our program. Tonight's guest performer has taken ill, but we are fortunate to have a remarkable musician who will perform for us. Please welcome Elena Rossi." Elena walked onto the stage, painfully aware of the whispers that spread through the audience. "A maid? They're letting a maid perform?" Several people laughed. Elena saw Olivia in the front row, her mouth hanging open in shock. Victoria stood at the back, her face twisted with jealous rage. But then Elena sat at the grand piano, and none of it mattered anymore. She began to play, and the laughter died instantly. The Rachmaninoff flowed from her fingers with raw, devastating emotion. Yes, there were small imperfections from her injury. A note held slightly too long, a run that wasn't quite as smooth as it once would have been. But the feeling behind the music was so powerful that the technical flaws became part of its beauty. This wasn't a perfect performance. It was a human one, full of pain and survival and hope. The audience sat in stunned silence. Elena played like she was pouring out her soul, every moment of suffering from the past year transformed into music. This was her truth, her story, told in a language deeper than words. When the final notes faded, the silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then an elderly man in the front row stood up. Elena recognized him immediately. Maestro Davidson, one of the most respected music critics in the country. She had performed for him before in her old life. "Elena Rossi," he said, his voice carrying through the silent auditorium. "We thought you had vanished from the music world entirely. What a gift to witness your return." The recognition rippled through the crowd. People who knew classical music knew her name. They had wondered what happened to the promising young pianist who had disappeared. Now they knew. The audience rose in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Elena stood at the piano, tears streaming down her face, accepting applause not as the person she used to be, but as the person she had become. Someone who had lost everything and kept going. Someone who had survived. Backstage, everything changed instantly. Maestro Davidson pulled her aside, already making phone calls. There was a foundation that supported injured musicians, he explained. They could help her. He knew a conservatory looking for piano instructors. Her performing days might be limited, but her teaching career could flourish. Mrs. Montgomery approached, her face pale. "Elena, I had no idea. We've treated you terribly." "Yes, you have," Elena said quietly. "There was no point in pretending otherwise." Mrs. Chen appeared, smiling. "I always knew who you were, child. I recognized you the first day. That's why I hired you. Sometimes people need to fall apart before they can rebuild themselves stronger." Thomas hugged her tightly. "Thank you for everything. For teaching me, for believing in me.